G'day Internet, and welcome back to part 2 of the Macintosh LC rescue. So last time round we basically got the machine running with a SCSI to SD hard drive, floppy drive works, we repaired the monitor and got an operating system installed, and it's all happy now. So the first step we're going to take today is we're going to take a look at the motherboard. I mentioned last time that there's some capacitors on that motherboard that are known to fail. So we'll start by removing the motherboard and taking a look at that. So this is the Mac LC as we left it last time. I'm going to start by removing the hard drive and the floppy drive, basically just to get them out of the way. Then I think the power supply. How the hell does this thing come out? Ah, right, okay, that was easy-ish. Right, so the speaker and the fan, which is very dirty, seems to simply just use these press contacts down on the motherboard. Ooh, that's dirty. Righto, next is to get the motherboard out. It's out. Wow, I didn't even have to reach for a screwdriver. Righto. Now, on this motherboard, we have, I believe, the video RAM and our 4 meg of normal system RAM. And that's kind of it. We have capacitors here, all around here, and a couple over on this side as well. So let's just get the RAM out of the way and pray I don't break clips. All right, 1, 2, 3. Right, next, capacitors. Now, I've already done one, and I want to start with a bit of an explanation. These are all SMD capacitors, I know. And yes, I'm replacing them with regular electrolytic capacitors, just like you see here. There's a couple of reasons for that. One, I wanted to get this done this weekend, and this is all I was able to get. Secondly, I've tried to do SMD capacitors and replace them with SMD capacitors in the past on other things and have not fared well. Now, that's just a personal thing. I personally have had better luck replacing them with these, and that's what I'm going to do. And if you don't like it, you can comment down below and I'll probably ignore you. But that's what I'm doing. So how do we do this? Now, there's various ways of removing the old capacitors. Some people simply hack them off and then remove the leads. I tend to find it okay to get a pair of bent needle nose pliers, heat up the pad and kind of rock it and just start loosening it up. Just get some heat into it and it'll start to be able to rock a little more. Now turn it around and I do the other side and get the tip of the soldering iron right in there, right in on the pad as deep as you can get it. And it'll start to loosen, and the trick is just to be patient. Don't try and rip the thing off in one hit. You'll make a mess and probably end up damaging the pad on the PCB. So that's starting to loosen up. I'm going to go back around to the first side. And it's starting to give way. That's that side done. Back to the second side. And there we go. One SMD capacitor removed. Then what I do like to do is get some solder wick and just clean up the old solder on the pads. Just to get them as clean as we can. Now this one hasn't leaked, so we don't have to worry about cleaning up any electrolytic juices, which I'd normally just do with a cotton bud and some isopropyl alcohol. So now I'm going to re-tin the pads. Right, now the Mac motherboard that I've got here is actually really well labelled. So we've got a plus, and we know that these capacitors, the line down the side is the negative. So the one without the stripe down the side is obviously the positive. Now, I was actually able to get some fairly small 47 UF capacitors to go in here. So what I'm able to do on some of these is actually stand them bolt upright. And I do that by simply splaying the legs straight out like that, kind of lining them up on the board to get the leg length, and then trimming them off. If you're not too sure, trim not enough off, and because you can always shorten it. Once you've cut it, you're a little stuffed. Okay. So we have capacitor, legs splayed out, cut to length, and then it's just a simple case of standing it in place, heating the solder, and it's just made a liar out of me because I didn't get it in centered. And there we go. Right, now we're going to simply continue doing the rest. So with the recapping out of the way, I next want to turn my attention to this chassis fan. Now I've already taken it out to the garage and given it a blowout with the air compressor. It looks like a fairly standard size fan, although it is kind of thin. So before I try and find another replacement, I have had success in the past with chassis and power supply fans of actually pulling them open. So depending on how this is constructed, may get lucky. Alright, so yes, there's normally a sticker and then a rubber cover that pops out. Now, this actually looks really clean inside. I'm not sure if actually warrants it. Because if the brushes are simply worn out, there's really not much we can do. And this doesn't seem to have a normal circlip in the top of it, so that's out. There is a little bit of gunk just kicking around in here though. I don't think I'm going to be able to do much with this, so we'll plug it in. We'll see how loud it is after a blowout, and we may just simply end up ordering a new one. So as you might be able to hear, blowing out the fan didn't really do much, so I'm going to have to get a new fan on order. So while that's happening, I think it's time to strip down the machine and get it ready for cleaning and retrobrighting. I think with the monitor, it's actually in pretty good condition, so I think it's just going to get a surface clean and not stripped right down, but definitely the computer and the keyboard and the mouse are due for a thorough bath time. All right, here we go again. Now here's the bit I'm unsure of. I know we're going to have to remove this lower RF shield, and probably, I think there's one, yeah, there's one inside the top lid as well. And I don't know how this comes out. Right, it's actually held in with a stack of tiny little plastic rivets. Huh. Now, do I just leave it in there? This rubber here is going to have to come out. Is it part of it? Is that all one piece of metal, or does it come out separately? I think it's all one piece. I don't like the idea of retrobriting this, A, with this rubber seal, and B, with this still in it. I think I'm going to have to cut all these and then super glue the thing back in. Am I going to be able to? Okay, cool. I can snip these with, hopefully, with a pair of flush cutters. Right, I think that's all of them. Oh, no, I've got one more here. Pretty sure I'm going to have to kind of get underneath the whole thing. And it has to lift directly up. Which should be fun, because I'm basically going to have to get my whole hand in underneath. That's a bit better. All right. And we're out. Okay, so that'll get all cleaned up. And then I'll probably araldite it back in. It just seems to go into the comb shape bit underneath. All right, let's have a look at the top lid. Yep, same thing. Okay. So the trick seems to be to put some downward pressure on the flush cutters to make sure they get right in underneath. And now we have our two pieces ready for a trip to the bathtub, I think. So next we need to turn our attention to disassembling the keyboard. Now, here's the thing. The whole keyboard is horrendously dirty. I get that. It's filthy. I don't know what's on it, but it's disgusting. But, and the plastics have all yellowed. The case has at least. But, and I've seen this on other Macs, the actual keys haven't. Now, if we think about for a second that the theory is that plastic's yellow because of the bromine-based fire retardant that's in the plastic, okay? Hence why all the cases yellow, the actual computer's yellow, so on and so forth. But the keys aren't. They're still the original color. They're just filthy dirty, except for the space bar. So I can only assume that Apple thought that the rest of the keyboard was fine, but we have an issue with the spacebar catching alight, so we better put the fire retardant in that. Anyway, I've already removed the screws, so that should come off. That should come out. The ADB plugs We've got whatever this is, some kind of RF protection maybe. And there's our keyboard. So all I'm going to do is carefully remove the spacebar, because that will need cleaning and retrobrighting. But this really only just needs cleaning. So I believe this just simply needs a lot of cleaner and a lot of paper towel. So we'll get onto that. You can see already up here, if you see the ones that I've cleaned and then the ones I haven't, yeah, it's kind of gross.
Here we go.
So I don't know how much you can see on camera, but this side here is a lot yellower than the rest of it. So it looks like my chances of not having to strip the monitor and retrobright it are pretty slim. So I guess we're pulling the monitor apart again. So now that everything's had a good solid bath, it's time for some retrobrighting with fudge. Alright, let's get to it. So with all the cleaning and retrobrighting done, it's all back together and it looks fantastic. I'm really happy with the way it all turned out. It's all nice and bright and clean again, and it looks $1,000,000. Now, before we go any further, there's a few things that didn't quite go to plan. Firstly, you may have noticed that you didn't actually get to see the finished version of the recapping of the motherboard, primarily because after the first view it started to go horribly wrong. I started having pads lift all over the place. That was the main thing, which meant then following traces, trying to solder things back together. I eventually got it all working, but it ended up a bit of a mess. When I started it, you may remember that I mentioned that some people simply clip off the SMD capacitors and then remove what's left, and that's actually the technique that I ended up going with for about the second half of the capacitors. But there was a lot of kind of basically botch work to keep it going again. The second thing that didn't actually go that well was the retrobrighting. As much as I was very fastidious about going out and massaging the cream around underneath the Glad wrap, I still ended up with a lot of streaks, and I think that's probably going to be the last time that I use that technique for retro brighting. I think I'm going to use the submersion technique, which is a big thing of water with peroxide actually poured, the liquid peroxide poured in, and see how that goes next time, because I ended up actually having to scrub the thing seriously with some Jiffy, well known in Australia is Jiffy. It's just basically cream cleanser, which has got a very mild abrasive in it, to get rid of the streaks. Now, normally I don't like doing that because you can ruin the texture of the plastic, but luckily that doesn't seem to have happened. So, all in all, I'm really happy with the way it turned out, with all the extra, like finding the mouse and putting the SD card in for the hard drive. I'm really happy. So, I think I'm going to go play some Warlords, because that was the game I used to play on it at my aunt's house. And thank you for watching.